I would like to welcome, please help me in welcoming, Joyce Gustafson. She is your commencement speaker today.
Thank you, Erin, and welcome everybody. Congratulations, grads, and welcome families, friends, esteemed faculty, Goddard students, and staff. It's wonderful to be here with you to celebrate the commencement of the Tush Push Dozen. As Erin said, I work in operations here, which I think of as taking care of our basic needs during residencies, mainly food and housing. So when you grads invited me to be your commencement speaker, I was flattered, and I was also a little surprised. Surprised because food and housing are the two things people complain about during a residency. But surprised also because most of our interactions have been me reminding you to fill out those forms, or you asking me to tell the cafeteria to please stop serving quinoa. Their position that quinoa is organic, rich in iron, and an heirloom grain is countered by your observations that it tastes like styrofoam, feels like grinding poppy seeds with your teeth, and smells like, well, an heirloom. So thank you for not holding me responsible for the menu choices, or for the wind that rattles these century-old buildings that animate at night with clanging pipes, hissing radiators, and who knows what. It's an honor to be here with you today, and as I look around the room, I'm struck at the amount of time, energy, and care each of us has invested in order to be here together in this place at this moment, especially our graduates. And when I thought about what I might say that would connect my experience of life with your own, an idea came to mind: transformation, and more specifically, transformative journeys. Rather than talk about these things in a conceptual fashion, I will share a personal story. When I was 24 years old, I went to sea on a small boat. It would be the first of many long-distance sailing voyages for me, but I didn't know that then. Our boat had no engine, no electronics. The plan was simple. We were bound for blue water, my husband and I, in search of romance and adventure. Growing up as I did in a small town back east, where a dozen donuts after church was the highlight of our week, this was not a lifestyle choice my parents embraced. I loved my family, but I wanted a different life. I wanted to know what was moving out there on the edge of things. So I made my way west, started working on boats, and fell in love with a sailor. That is how I found myself heading out to sea. I knew little of life and nothing of the ocean. The lessons came quickly. Alone on deck one black night, I found myself lashed to a jackline to keep from falling overboard, wrestling with a headsail as my husband slept below. Scuttling back to the cockpit, I suddenly realized this was my new romantic reality. My husband and I stood watches alone every night we spent at sea for 7 years. We sailed 30,000 miles together, alone, 4 hours on, 4 hours off. Unmoored from land, life had new dimension. Depth became a place, a watery world inches from where I lay at night. No longer something I could measure, depth was a universe below, a place of moving shadow, gasping breath, and alien life. I learned that friends could disappear in this netherworld and never be seen again, that all I would have to remember them by was the sound of their names, Gary and Kara. It turned out that the locals were not always friendly, as we discovered the night 5 men tried to board our boat from an island off Panama. We thought the place deserted, when suddenly they were alongside. They had clubs in their boat, a steel gaff for hooking fish, and were covered in slime and blood. It was the child that stopped them from boarding, a boy we met on an island nearby, whose family had asked us to take to Panama, a 9-year-old who disarmed the men by calling out to them in their dialect when they grabbed for our boat. And while I do not justify the harm those men intended, I came to understand them better when I learned how they lived. We met hundreds of locals who were friendly, islanders and fishermen, with lives made hollow by hardship and hunger. Men who, although they did not share the violent intent of those men that night in Panama, did share their lives of desperate poverty. Poverty I found I was complicit in by the actions of my government, corporations that fly my country's flag, and by my own inaction. My sailing adventure began to challenge my unexamined beliefs about what it meant to be American, what it meant to be safe, what it meant to be human. I understood for the first time that we affect other people's lives simply because we exist. I started to ask myself, how am I living? What do I care deeply about? Who do I love? If the hard knocks at sea were what prompted these questions, the moments of beauty kept me engaged. On deck at night, the dolphins would come. They'd streak through the sea like missiles on fire, 100 phosphorescent meteors shooting across our bow. I learned 1,000 names for wind, the personalities of waves, that earth smells sweetest after a month at sea. Joining with the wild forces of the elemental world gave life urgency. I saw how precious time is, that we can use what little we have to reclaim a sense of wonder that is our birthright. Yes, the world is more dangerous than we know, but it is also more beautiful than we imagine. When we cling to our notions of how things should be, we refuse the world as it is and cut ourselves off from the magic. I started crossing oceans because I wanted to change my life, but the journey taught me I could transform my world. Change would rearrange the circumstances, but transformation would alter the way I perceive the world and my place in it. Change happens whether we participate or not. Transformation demands we engage with the process. I know this is not a novel idea to you, grads, for I have watched your own transformative journeys unfold these past 2 years. And indeed, the process lives with us here like a sorceress in a fable. We respect this mysterious power, but we are uneasy in its presence. And yet we engage, because we cannot live in a world without beauty. We engage because we must find ways to connect with the deepest parts of ourselves and each other. We engage because we know that when we pay deep attention to what is so, we find ourselves in harmony with what is most alive and moving in the world. And that experience is one that the artist and sailor both seek. Some people claim we are all artists. If that is true, I would say that some of us have forgotten, or we have never been told. Many don't know what we are missing or how much we have lost. We need passionate, engaged artists to remind us. As the poet and writer Lewis Hyde has said, a work of art is a gift that has the power to change us by awakening a part of the soul. I will tell you why this is true. In 2007, I traveled to Sri Lanka, where tens of thousands of people died in a tsunami in the Indian Ocean. I went with a nonprofit called Art Refuge, a group that provides children who have lived through trauma a chance to express themselves through art. Art Refuge teamed up with a medical relief group in Sri Lanka. They brought medicine, equipment, and doctors. We brought oil sticks, paints, and artists. We held painting workshops on ruined beaches in remote villages, the haunting sound of surf competing with monkeys, 200 kids covered in paint. As each child came forward to talk about their painting, the rest of us listened. Anjana, a 5-year-old, painted a blurry image of a house in gray fog. Pointing to a dark, shapeless form on the roof, he said, "That is my father's ghost." His mother, who was translating, leaned in to hear him better. Every day the villagers told Anjana where they had seen his father's ghost the night before, on the beach, high in a coconut tree, on the roof of his house. Anjana was 2 when his father died in the tsunami. 3 years later, all he knew of him was this frightening apparition. Until she saw his painting, his mother had not known of his secret terror. Samantha was 14 when he lost his father in the tsunami. He painted a scene from on high, looking down onto a village below, its houses flattened. He told us about the day a year before the tsunami, when he and his father visited relatives in a remote village. Returning home, they stopped for tea at a roadside stand when wild elephants rampaged from the jungle. At his father's urging, Samantha climbed a water tower to safety. From there, they watched as the elephants destroyed the village below. It was clear that Samantha's father was the hero of the story for having saved their lives. Yet Samantha had not talked about him since the tsunami, could not speak his father's name, and had not for 3 years. It was his painting that provided the opening, art that offered him refuge. One by one, the kids came forward to share their paintings and tell their stories. Every child lost someone or something they loved. Kids that were silent and withdrawn when they arrived began to lift their heads and look around as they listened to others. Individual stories of loss became a shared experience rather than solitary, isolating grief. The kids' paintings forming a tier, a river, an ocean on which we all sailed. It was the power of community art in practice, the healing through art that is possible when we are willing to tell the truth and bear witness. It was art, as Lewis Hyde said, with the power to change us by awakening a part of the soul. You carry this power within you, grads, and it is what you will release into the world when you leave here today. Our faculty has shown you the stars that will help you navigate strange and sometimes frightening waters, and most important, to report back what you have learned. For talent like yours cannot be contained, it must find form. And of all the forms and practices I have seen you engage with here, there is one that stands apart for me. It is the practice of empathy, that uniquely human ability to care deeply about another person's life, even though we have not experienced it ourselves. Through your honest engagement with important issues like cultural appropriation and white privilege, by the intimate sharing of your work and acceptance of each other's, and the ways in which you support one another when times are tough, I have seen you as a community actively cultivate empathy. To me, this ability to understand another person's experience is one of the most imaginative acts we can perform. When we are able to locate ourselves in someone else's life, compassion arises, which is its own ocean. Just as wind propels a sailboat at sea, compassion compels us to act if necessary. And when human beings, motivated by compassion, take collective action, that is what transforms the world. I don't know what paths your lives will take when you leave here today, and I'm not suggesting that we are tasked with saving the whole world, or that we have to cross oceans to find meaning in our lives. I do know that we can attend to the world that is right in front of us, and that a small kindness goes a long way. And I have seen that we can use art as a way to construct identity, that through art we can make conscious the bewildering beauty of this world. I also know this: the world is hungry for what you know. And if there are days when you forget that, and no one seems to care about your work, and there will be those days, remember those times when it feels like our lives are fracturing, our hearts breaking. That's how the light gets in. So shine on, dear grads. Know that you leave here today taking a part of us with you and leaving behind a place that is richer because you were here. You are ready, and we are with you. Congratulations.